And so when I connected with you and Soraya, and you had asked a question, I think, what topic or what story do you think you would write about? I had said, I already know. I already know the story before having been asked of what I want to speak into the world. And so that's when I got back into writing, and again, kind of how it all flowed together that way. I had already started pre-writing the story before even knowing that it was going to become part of a book. I didn't know how or where. It just felt like I need to share this story somehow. And so that's how that came to be.
Okay, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, beautiful souls, to another episode of Be Light to Raise Light. Today, we step into the flowing wisdom of the river through the story of Natalie McCrory Nowkawalk. Her piece, "Oh River, Carry Me Home," is not just about water, it's about life itself. From early memories of separation as a baby to a moment of deep fear and being lost on the tundra, Natalie's journeys reveal how the river carries us through heartbreak, through healing, and always back to love. This is a story of resilience, motherhood, and the quiet yet powerful truth that even when we feel most alone, we're always being carried home. So welcome, Natalie, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Nishma. It's such an honor to be here and be part of this process. And thank you for the beautiful introduction.
Oh my God. First of all, before we even start, being an author of Be Light to Raise Light, and okay, now a Hay House author, I need to ask you one question before we start this. Why Be Light to Raise Light? What got you to step into this beautiful role to write a book with us?
So I always believe life connects us kind of like the river, it flows. So I had actually met through another place called Art of Peaceful Living. It was an online group forum that I had connected with actually during COVID time, and ended up becoming involved in workshops and led by Sid and Liz McNary. And Sid has written quite a number of books. So book writing came into that and so on. And Soraya actually attended one of the workshops, the online conferences we did. And that's initially how I had met Soraya and connected with Soraya. And so when this Be Light to Raise Light book was coming together, she had actually reached out to me knowing that I love motherhood and nature and writing, and she had remembered that, and so lovingly reached out. And that's how I got connected with you both in this process. So it's been really amazing. The connections, how life connects us. Yes.
And to actually say the big yes, that was amazing, right? To feel it, to know it, to knowing that you are actually in this book, and that to actually finally say, Natalie, you're a Hay House author, is a feeling of just unbelievable, magical.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is. Magical is a great word for it.
Yeah. So happy you're here. Okay, so let
Thank
me
you.
go through an open question for you.
Sure.
Your story is deeply connected to rivers, healing, and finding your way home. So, what inspired you to begin writing and sharing this journey with the world?
I have always loved nature. I've always been drawn to water, and I've actually always lived near water, the lake. I've grown up on Lake Huron, and even when I've moved to different places, I've been drawn to the river and the lake. Even when I lived in Montreal, the city, I would go to the St. Lawrence River to find my peace. And when I was up north, the Hudson Bay and the river. So I've always been drawn to nature, trees. I've always also had a love of writing. Always. I started when I was very young, as soon as I learned how to pick up pencil and paper and was asked to write in grade one. I remember I just started writing and I wrote out the story of the Wizard of Oz. And I just found out that I love writing and expressing myself through writing. So that's really brought me through a lot of situations in my life, and the connection of the two. As a teenager, I would often go sit by the river and do some writing poetry, writing. When I went through different struggles in life, I would write poems and stories. And so writing has really gotten me through a lot of situations, as well as keeping that connection to nature. I would say later on in my adulthood, I lost the inspiration to write just from the busyness of life. And
Mm,
so, as I mentioned earlier, when I reconnected through the art of peaceful living, and with Sid being a writer, he gave a workshop on writing a story. And so that really inspired me to start thinking about, oh, if I were to write a story or a book, what would I want it to be about? And that's always been a dream of mine, to write a book, as many people have that dream. So that really got me thinking about different topics. And this story about being lost in the tundra was one that really stood out for me, as somehow I want to weave this into any book or any story. And so when I connected with you and Soraya, and you had said, asked a question, I think, what topic or what story do you think you would write about? I had said, I already know. I already know the story before having been asked
yeah.
of what I want to speak into the world. And so that's when I got back into writing, and again, kind of how it all flowed together that way. I had already started pre-writing the story before even knowing that it was going to become part of a book. I didn't know how or where. It just felt like I need to share this story somehow. And so that's how that came to be.
That is so beautiful, because when you tell me a little bit about how you met Saran and then how you actually were sitting there, and then the fact that all the way down to the fact that, you were a little child sitting by the river, always writing, and then you lost your writing, and then you got back to your writing, and now you actually did a writing where you just didn't know how it would get produced or how it would get there, and somehow ended up on this Be Light to Raise Light book. Every bit of that is like a little journey you went through, hey? And
Mm,
it was like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but it's going to happen. And it happened,
yes.
you know?
Yes.
What a beautiful way of saying that, because when I had my dream of Be Light to Raise Light, and I saw a book where the entire book was just kind of like opening up in sparks and in whatever it was it was basically that probably brought you into this beautiful
Mm.
divine energy. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy that you were able to share this story with us, and I cannot wait for everyone to read it. So you speak so beautifully about how early life experiences, even ones we don't consciously remember, can stay with us. What did learning your own childhood story teach you about yourself as an adult?
I think learning my own childhood stories has really validated both my joys and sorrows in life.
Mhm.
And when I think about when I've learned stories of, for example, my parents, so a lot of the stories I learned about, say, my dad's story of his childhood or my mom's story. They were very wonderful, and they have been wonderful about sharing parts of their childhood, which has been very significant and very meaningful for me to hear those stories. And so when my dad would talk about stories of my grandfather I know very well, and I definitely brought him into the story because he was a very important person in my life. My grandfather had been in the war and missed raising his daughter. And when my dad was born, then it was just really him and his parents. And he lost his mom very young. He was only about 12 or 13. They were getting ready for a camping trip. And my grandmother went inside to get something and never came back out. This is a very sad story. So, and from my mom's side, my mom was born of 11 children. She comes from a family of 11 children,
Mm.
and her being number 10. So when my grandmother was pregnant with my mom, and when she was going into labor, they didn't have time. She didn't have time to go to the hospital. And so she gave birth at home with my grandfather helping.
Yeah.
And it was only at that moment after my mom was born that she realized she was pregnant with twins.
Oh, wow.
And so my auntie was born after my mom. Can you imagine? She
Yeah.
was had all these children already, and then twins were born. And so my parents have both shared many incredible stories of their childhood and their upbringing, and they always felt very significant. So for a long time I didn't really think much about my childhood stories. I felt like I had a fairly decent childhood. I had a house, I was fed, I went to school, I progressed through life. And I think it was through this experience of getting lost in the tundra that really brought me back to remember some of my childhood stories and how significant they are, and how each of us, I truly believe each of us has such a wealth of stories of
Mhm.
experiences that we go through, and all of them significant. And it's so easy to sometimes compare one story to another. And even my story about being lost in the tundra, I often minimized to myself, thinking, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not sure why it affected me so much. People have gone through so much worse in their life. And yet it's about honoring our experience and how each of our experiences are so valid, the challenges and the joys. And so I think by connecting through my own counseling and therapy, when my therapist finally asked me, was there anything that ever happened in your life where you may have felt that lost feeling? And that's when I made that connection to a story my parents had shared with me about, which I share in the story about my mom getting sick when I was 6 months old, and that experience of feeling lost and what I would have imagined or understood of feeling. So it really kind of woke up that connection for me that, oh, we can experience and hold things in our body. And those types of memories get stored very different in our body and brain. We don't have the memories, only the pictures of what people might tell us happened, but we hold the emotions and we hold in our body what happened at the time. And sometimes other situations might happen in life that wake that up or reignite, or some people say trigger that or bring it up again in a very big way that it's hard to understand. And so I find that validating my story of what happened to me without having to compare to anyone else's has been so important for me to understand my life and my experiences. And it's really helped me honor the experiences I lived through in childhood, both the positives and the negatives, to honor them and understand how they've impacted me today and what I can do to work through a lot of those, as well as to embrace life more fully by honoring myself and my experiences, and therefore honoring everyone. Each person's experiences and stories that they hold are important and precious.
Yes. I love that you said that we are all unique and different in our stories, right? Every single
Yes.
person
Yeah.
actually goes through their own journey, their own life, and just hearing other people's journeys and other people's life is so beautiful, because we go through a journey that we have to go through in our own ways, in our own places, to actually heal in our own way, in our own place. For us, I love hearing your stories of your mom and your background of your family, and oh my God, so many kids. Yes, like absolutely. And then from there, how you actually started to heal, or go through your stage of trauma. And it was probably not as big of a deal compared to a lot of people, but again, it was your story. It was what brought you to where you are today, and to heal those little amounts, and heal whatever story it is that's within you to get to where you need to be in life. And so I always believe
Yes.
every single person has their unique ways of healing, unique ways of going through things, and we just have to be there in that moment at that time to allow them for wherever they are, to meet them wherever they are. So I love that
Yes,
you
that's
said that.
beautifully
Yeah.
said. Yeah, beautifully said. And how, not only do we carry our own stories of what have happened to us, I believe we can carry our ancestral stories. And so,
Yes.
what I had shared a little bit earlier about my grandmother, when I think about, again, this experience of being lost in the tundra, there I was leaving my sons from, although it was a tent, and my fear, I wouldn't have connected this at the time, but what if I don't return to them? This is my dad's story repeating. Mom leaves, we're out camping or in his case, they were getting ready to go camping. But in this scenario, we were out camping and I left the tent for a walk. And in my state of panic, thought I wasn't going to return.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't understand, but I thought I was going to die there. That was my experience of it. And so could I have been living the experience,
Brilliant.
right? My ancestral experience of what maybe wasn't able to be fully grieved by my dad or my grandfather, or that story, and carrying that somehow, having heard it or having carry some of that. I think we carry things in our DNA and genetically from our generational traumas or generational gifts as well, I think get carried into us both. And so it's so interesting when you experience big events in life to be able to stop and pause and look at them and understand, where does this reaction come from? Where does this response come from? And am I carrying it from my childhood? Oh, could I be carrying it from my father's childhood? And so on and so on. And so I think that generational piece too is really powerful, to know the stories. It kind of goes back to the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
When we share our stories and know our stories and share our stories with our children when they're at the age to hear the stories, I think it's so helpful. I think it's so powerful. And when we can share our stories into the world, oftentimes people will connect to similar stories. All of a sudden, somebody reads a story or hears a story and says, me too. Or, oh, that's something similar happened in my family or to my parent or my grandparent or to me. And so there's the connection and the flow of it all again.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much, so many questions I can ask you about this, but it'll go completely in a completely different direction, completely. So I won't go into depth for that. But what reminds me a little bit about that, I just want to say is sometimes our personality and the things that we bring into this world is also from, I also believe, from our old life that we don't really know. Do you believe that?
Mm,
Yeah, it's also
yes.
coming in from our old life. What is it
Yes.
that we had at that time? Our personality, our things that we did or whatever it is that's coming back to us here. And this is where we're probably getting a lot of our personalities and the way we talk or the way we think or the way we feel or the way we heal, everything is coming in from there. So I don't know. That's just
Yes.
another idea.
It's such a
Yeah.
fascinating conversation we could have just around that.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about your turning point here. You describe a powerful moment of being lost in the tundra, like you just said,
Hmm.
both terrifying and transformative. So looking back, how did that experience change your perspective on life and yourself?
I think the turning point for me is when I had a pause in the panic. Because during the time where I was lost and felt lost and didn't know which way to turn, I felt like I have to completely rely on myself.
Hmm.
And I didn't know north, south, east, west. There was so many conditions that I couldn't orientate myself. And then adding being in a state that made me panic.
Hmm.
And then being in a state of panic, it's hard to think clearly. It's like our logical brain shuts down. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to piece together. So in panic, I was trying to reach for anything that I could remember in those moments um, of at the time, my son's father had told me if someone's lost, just stay put, stay still so people can find you. So I was trying to remember that and stick to that. So I was trying to grasp at anything that I could remember to help guide me. But ultimately, I was relying on myself. Okay, I have to try to see through the fog, or I have to try to figure out with my feet which way to go. And so, in that state of panic, it enhanced and exacerbated the lost feeling. And so when I was able to stand by the water, once I got next to the water, I had a pause in my panic and I was able to take a breath. And that's when everything shifted and everything transformed. And I explain that in the story, but that's when I had an experience of recognizing where I was, what the body of water was, where I was standing, which was different than I thought I was where I was. So it brought clarity and so it brought a sense of peace. I had a sense of peace then. I was able to say actually a prayer, and I hadn't thought in the hours before to just stop and pray and try to ground myself or take some breaths. I just couldn't even think to do that because I was in such a state of panic. So the pause and the panic came with a moment of stillness and a moment of just pray. And that's when I reached in my mind and just said a prayer. I said, God, just guide me. And it's like this peace came over me and I knew what to do. And that's when things changed. And I really think of this whole experience as an analogy of my life, because in that scenario, in a bigger picture, I was feeling lost in where I was in my life and not knowing which way to turn, where to go. And I really gained a clarity because when I thought I was going to die, and when I said to myself, I do this is not the place I want to die.
Mm.
I had a very clear moment of I do not want to die here. I don't want to leave my sons alone, and I don't want to die here in this spot. And therefore, after I knew if I don't want to die here, maybe I don't want to live here. It brought like a clarity and a very clear path, and actually brought me back home.
Mm.
So in circle, I found my way back to the tents in that scenario. But in life, I found my way back home to where I grew up. So it was very symbolic experience in a very intense, shorter period of time, but very transformative because it really opened the path to my life and where I needed to go and how to come back home. And when I came back home, I also felt like a coming back home to myself. I could reconnect to myself in parts that I had lost. And so a very significant experience on many levels for me.
Mm-hmm. That is so beautiful. And just, that moment when you said, when you tell your story and someone can look back and say, me too.
Yes.
I felt that today with you.
Yeah.
Yes, me too. You have to go through a whole lot of trauma to actually sit there one day and just take a deep breath, no matter where it is. For you, it was the river. For me, is just sitting there and looking above the sky. And it's that question of saying, "Oh God, please help me.
Mm.
Oh, please, please help me. I don't want to die like this. I don't want to get into this situation." And it's always that scary moment that sometimes leads to the next stage in our life. Have you noticed
Mm.
that? It's a lot of stories that have come with Be Light to Raise Light. It's about how they got this moment of scaredness to lead them to the next generation, to the next life pattern or the next place in their life. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see that. It's beautiful to see everyone's story that falls that way. And I love that you were able to take that
Yes.
moment for yourself and find that moment and say, okay, this is what I need now. I hear the voices, I hear what I need to get done, and I know where I need to be now because this is not the place.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I really look forward to hear and read everyone's stories as well, because absolutely through those challenges, through those struggles is where often we are humbled enough, I think, and in a place where we can ask and receive in a different way. And it just opens up a different pathway in life that if we just try to push through and ignore all of that or continue to stay stuck in that, it really limits where we can be and what we can do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the river is such a beautiful teacher. I think it's such a beautiful way of teaching us things. And when I was actually reading your story about the river itself, I had to imagine this river going through different pathways, different ways, going on top of the water, getting into the curve of a rock to get to its destination. It doesn't matter how big that rock is or how small that rock is or what obstacle it's going through, it knows how to get through in order to
Mm-hmm.
flow. And this is where I learned a lot about when it came to your story, because it's such a beautiful way of reading it. I can't wait for others to read it, of course. I don't want to tell the full story of it, but it really brings the essence of where our life itself, which
Yes.
comes to my next question is the river feels almost like a character in your story.
Mm.
It's always guiding you, teaching you, and holding wisdom. So I know you've answered this, but just in another way, what has the river taught you about resilience and healing?
Yes. Well, I open the story with the quote by Roderick Haig Brown about the river connecting to the heart, what he describes the heart as like the heart and the ocean or the big waterway. And I've always thought of the rivers like this, kind of like the veins and the arteries. They come from the ocean or the lake, which is like the heart, and then move through the earth and circle back. Water will find its way back, just like in our body.
Mhm.
Our heart, I believe, is the center, and the veins and arteries carry the blood through and from, but always back to the heart and refreshing, and then always branches out to every part of the body. And so the river is so beautiful in that way. And I think in any form of a river, as you said, we could pause and look at the river, whether it's a abundant flowing river or a stagnant little stream, or the stream, as you said, that kind of meanders over rocks. And I think we could, as an analogy, look at any part of our life and relate to that river in whatever state it's in, and how we're just trying to find our way back,
To
how we're trying
balance.
to find our way out, out into the world, and then finding our way back and back to the heart and back to that love. So I think the river represents such a resilience and such a flow that water itself, and I do think water is a teacher. I do think water is life. And I do think water holds wisdom and can give so many lessons. And I think it's not coincidence that we're made of mostly water, but
Yeah.
also that many, many people, when asked what's a calm place for you, will say by the water,
It's
by a
so true.
lake,
Yeah.
by the beach. When people want to travel, it's often to, go on a river or a cruise or go to a beach somewhere, or even from a mountain, but to have a view of water, or go kayaking or canoeing, river, like in whatever form of water. I think we need water. And it just brings up that reminder so strongly in me of care for the earth, care for the water, protect the earth, because that is us.
Mm.
We are not apart from it.
No.
We are part of it and it part of us. And so we can connect to it. And I mean, we drink it, we are made of it. So I think the river is, in its form, the river represents the flow of it.
Hmm.
It represents the branching out and the flowing back. It's the breath in, the breath out. So I think there's so many beautiful lessons of the river.
I
Yeah,
love that
I
because
really love rivers,
yes,
as you
yes,
can tell.
I can tell so beautifully. And the way that you say it is just with so much love and so much heart into it, and I love that you said that it actually flows into the heart. It comes out from the heart, it gets into the world, it goes through all its little areas, and then it goes back into the heart. Just like our life. I think nature itself does a very similar process like that too. Every nature you look into, we are nature ourselves. Everything we are built of is with nature, just like a flower having its roots. We have our roots all inside of our body that will bring our nutrients and stuff, which is a whole different topic, but very similar to how you said something to do with the river. And I love that your story talks a lot about that because it's really like a character in your story. And so when others read it, it's really going to bring out a lot of tears and a lot of hearts and love into the story because you will be able to bring your own healing and your own story into this story to say, wow, I cannot believe like this is the way that this is written. So absolutely beautiful. Like I said, I don't want to give out too much of the information. I want others to read it. So
Thank
here's,
you, Niche.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
so welcome. So here's some I would love for you to do right now is your story holds such depth and beauty. So, would you share a short excerpt that you feel will inspire our listeners today?
Sure. I want to share a part to honor my grandfather,
Please.
who I mentioned earlier. This is my dad's dad. So I'll read this from my story. I have a photo of myself a little over a year old. My left leg was crooked. There was no medical explanation, so my thought is that perhaps my want and need to stand up and move in such determined ways before my body was fully ready, as a baby, created an injury. I had special shoes to help me walk, and the doctor had said I would need corrective surgery to straighten my leg. My dad's dad, my granddad, who had been present and held me when I was born and loved me deeply, placed his large, strong hands on my little leg and prayed that God heal me. My leg miraculously healed after that. Doctors could not explain. My leg grew healthy and strong so that I could walk miles and miles, ride bikes and horses, climb trees, and play soccer. Walking carried me for hours along the river near my home, brought me to and from part time jobs to school and through university. Walking has carried me through life.
That's
So I
beautiful.
thank you. I chose that in one to honor my grandfather and that incredible, what I call a miracle that happened, because there really was no explanation. The healing happened very quickly after the prayer. And because walking has been such an integral part of my life, I really wanted to add that in the story and really wanted to share that today, as an experience that I had with my grandfather. That had I not had that experience, I may have had a surgery and it may have corrected, and I don't know, but certainly it's added to my life in such an amazing way that I was able to have a strong, healthy leg and two strong, healthy legs and be able to walk through life. The interesting thing was I went for an assessment from a manual therapist who knew nothing about my background. She actually does the assessment first and then she gets you to fill out the medical history. And when she was checking different parts of my body, when she got down by my leg, she said, "There's something with your left leg. I don't know what it is. It feels like there was like life out of it." Or she's like, "I can't really explain what's there, but there's something about your left leg." And at the time, I hadn't remembered the story about my grandfather and my legs. So I had no idea what she was talking about and couldn't imagine, and just took in that information. And later on, it clicked in my mind the story about my leg. So I called my mom and said, Mom, I think I was about a year old or 18 months old at the time. I said, Mom, which of my little legs was the crooked leg that needed the surgery? And she said, it was your left leg. And then I realized in that moment that, oh, it's interesting how we still carry the stories even in our body. We can heal, yet our body still carries the story. So somehow that woman picked up on that story. There were no words to it, and she didn't know what it was, and I didn't have the words to know what it was then. But it really brought that feeling up when I remembered that story, to be so grateful to my grandfather, to God, like for that experience and for that healing experience. So that felt important to share.
Yeah, you've come from a very powerful background, a very enlightening background, I have to say. You know, I've heard a lot of stories like this, the miracle stories, where a lot of these women that have gone through their own miracle life, and their stories that they share then has been come back to missionaries of like people that work around our community. And they have said, this is a very empowering story. People that do things like this, like your grandpa or your grandfather, was probably very spiritually aligned to such power, to such grace, that he was able to be able to do something like this for you. Unknowingly so beautiful that today you're able to have this beautiful miracle in your leg, your left leg, that now others can see and feel the actual magical moment of that. That is just beyond words I can explain. That's just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That is just,
Thank you.
wow. I needed to hear that today. This is my miracle for actually being able to hear this today, because
Mm-hmm.
now it's going to be out there for others to hear it too when they listen to it. It's a miracle. These miracles happen in life. These miracles are around us and we don't see them. And when they do come to us and they are stories to share, listen, they're not lies. They're really beautiful miracles out
Mm-hmm.
there. I also believe I listened to a lady called Dolores Cannon. She used to, she's not here with us any longer, but she used to talk to angels and be able to heal people at the same, very similar ways. Through, I think one lady she was trying to heal, and she was telling the angels that she's having a heart problem. They had to repair her heart, they repaired her knees, they repaired everything from spiritual healing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. And people around her that were watching it was saying, this is a miracle. How are you able to
Wow.
heal these people by just talking to these angels?
I wrote her name down. I hadn't heard of her. So I will definitely look into that. I guess I
Yeah.
would just say, when we're talking about healing, and, I shared very briefly, and I'll just say this very, very brief, with my grandfather, with this experience, he certainly had to go through his own healing journey. When I think of my two grandfathers, like ancestrally, my two grandfathers, my grandfather had gone through the war and then, as you know, like lost his wife and missed raising his daughter's early years. And he had these different traumas and became an alcoholic
Mm,
after being like a war veteran, and his traumas, that unresolved traumas from the war. And so my dad's childhood was a little more difficult. However, my grandfather did go through a lot of ways to heal his trauma. From physical, he would do gymnastics 8 hours a day. And then he came to prayer, like he came to God in prayer, and that really transformed him and overcame his alcoholism. And so by the time I was born, when I met my grandfather, I only ever knew this beautiful soul,
yeah.
this gentle, loving, God loving grandfather who just loved me and my brothers and family. And so that was the grandfather I knew because he had healed.
Yeah.
Whereas my other grandfather, who I didn't get to know very well, was also had unresolved trauma and an alcoholic, but very abusive to his family. And so their family has had to carry and do their own healing because he never did choose or take the opportunity to heal his traumas, and therefore never overcame being abusive or an alcoholic. So the very different paths people can take, and having that contrast of two grandfathers, and the experience that I've experienced as a granddaughter, knowing the stories and what we carry, I think really highlights, and I'm always an advocate of heal our own traumas,
Mm-hmm.
because that story that I just shared about my grandfather is just one like small ripple effect of the beauty and the healing and what can get passed on generationally through that healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I always advocate and for myself too to heal my own traumas and want people to heal their traumas as much as they're able to for themselves in the world and future generations, because it really does have an incredible, beautiful sparkle, like you said from the book. It's like the sparkle in life. It just gets passed on. The healing gets passed on too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it. Every single person here, we go through our own background, our own healing journeys, our beautiful magical memories that we have, and everything that we do is all unique. So I'm really happy that you brought that up and you talked a little bit about it and you're able to share that, because that itself is going to create your story even more when others read it, to actually see the background of where it came from, to actually understand the story in depth. So thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Yes,
you. Thank
yeah.
you.
Oh, it's so awesome. So your story, as inspiring as it is, how can our listeners connect with you, follow your journey, or learn more about your work?
I am reachable through my email,
Okay.
natalie.positiveliving@gmail.com, my website, www.natalienowkawalk.com. I'm on Instagram, natalie.positive. And those are probably the easiest ways to reach me for any of those. If anyone has questions or wants to contact, or as well through yourself to read the book, that hopefully people will be able to read the book and all the wonderful stories in the book of such wisdom and experiences and overcoming challenges and motherhood and conscious parenting and spreading that light into the world.
Yes. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Thank you always for being here and being able to be a voice for so many beautiful mothers out there, and a voice for women and people that want to heal, and being that miracle that we can see that is a living miracle. And so from there on, others can read your story and say, she did it. Anyone can do it. Right.
Thank you so much, Nish, for inviting me in, for being part of this process, and for making stories of myself and others more accessible to the world so that hopefully everyone can have a chance to share their stories.
Oh my God, so happy, so happy. So thank you for joining us in the waters of Natalie's story. The river reminds us that even in moments when life feels overwhelming, when we feel lost or disconnected, there is always a current guiding us back to love, to healing, to ourselves, back to the heart. We May we all remember, as Natalie has shown us, that no matter the rocks or rapids along the path, we too can find our way back home. Until next time, keep walking with love, keep flowing with grace, and keep shining your light. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everybody.
much.
Be Light to Raise Light is a sacred and extraordinary platform where mothers are invited to shine brilliantly and share their unique stories with the world. Through books, stages, social gatherings, and more, we elevate these voices to the highest vibration, illuminating not only their personal journeys, but the collective consciousness of the world. Our vision is to create a radiant community of mothers who come together to inspire, empower, and light up the world with their truth and wisdom. Be Light to Raise Light is a space where authenticity thrives, stories resonate, and every woman's light is celebrated. Join us in this beautiful mission by becoming part of our community. Follow us on Facebook at Be Light to Raise Light, or on Instagram at Be Light to Raise Light, or connect with us directly by email at inspire@belighttoraiselight.com. Together, let's ignite a movement of light, love, and transformation.